Good afternoon and welcome back to our live webinar here at First Baptist Jackson in partnership with our Summit Counseling Ministry as we continue our series, Navigating the New Normal. Today we have Shannon Collins with us again. but we also have Don Waller with us today. And so, Don, I want to begin by just thanking you for being here today. And if you will, share with us a little bit some of your interests or maybe some of your specialties in counseling.
I will, Chip. Thank you. So 18 years I was in the business world. And with that, I was in oil and gas business and construction business. But I also served in church, taught Sunday school, and just my heart had always been toward men's ministry and leading groups and teaching Sunday school. And God, I don't know, He just opened this door to go back to school and get a counseling degree at 41. Yeah. And so it was really just a faith walk each day. I don't know if there was any one thing specific, but it wasn't like it was easy. It was still praying and asking God to lead me, because I think at times work was unfulfilling, at times it was fulfilling, but knowing that God was leading me through this. And once I decided to go back and get a counseling degree, the doors just opened. And so Dr. Mumbauer was here at that time and hired me when I graduated. But my focus has been on men and their issues, and also couples, and just helping them navigate, and having, you know, the 18 years of business background really, I think, gave me a sense of experience and be able to speak into people's lives who are struggling either in their jobs or their marriages.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of which, today we're going to be focusing on marriage matters. You know, the last couple of weeks we've had a big focus on dealing with our children and helping them navigate the new normal. But as moms and dads or husbands and wives, you know, it's a new normal for us too. And so today we're going to be answering your questions about how to continue to build your marriage in the midst of this, well, weird time that we're in. I want to remind you that at the bottom of the screen there's a phone number, and you can text in your questions to that phone number, and your text will be anonymous. Nobody will see your name. That text will end up coming to one of our guys in the room, who will then send it to me on my phone. I'll have no idea who it is who's sending the question. But it's an opportunity for you to ask questions for these counselors to be able to answer for you. Before we get to the topic of marriage, though, we had a question that was submitted after our webcast last week. And the question had to do with, you know, we spent a lot of time talking about schedules for our children and our teenagers, but a question came into us about how to deal with college students who have now moved at home, particularly as it pertains to schedule, allowing them to have their freedom, but you know, helping them kind of merge in with the family unit as it has already been. And so what advice would you give to parents of college students who have now come home?
Well, I would say, you know, we have to give ourselves time to adjust to these things. Yeah. We got to have time to show grace, to say, you know, none of us really know how to do this well. Yeah. And for some kids, I think it's easier to come right back into that system than others. So if we sense that they're having trouble with that, we acknowledge that, you know, and say, I know it's difficult. I know you're not used to being around this many people. I know, you know, at home right now, I know it's different for you, and it's okay. And acknowledging that and giving them grace and saying, you know, if you need time by yourself, then just say it. You know, just say, hey, I'm going to go in here for a little while by myself. I've got to work on my online classes. And, you know, being able to say it is important, I think, and giving them that permission to say it. Also realizing that they're not going to be under your thumb like the younger children, and that that's normal and okay, and that we don't need to expect them to be.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So I have a senior in college home, and I have a senior in high school. And what we've done is we've just invited them into, whether we're cooking or doing something out in the yard, right, doing a puzzle together. And so we've just included them to give them a chance to do it together. And it's really increased our emotional intimacy with our children, our adult children. But we've also had to step back and give them room to also be themselves and have that, because they came from being on their own to coming home, and that is a big adjustment.
It is.
Absolutely, it is. But now let's move to the topic of marriage. And so life has changed for a lot of people, right? I mean,
yes, absolutely.
Moms and dads, or many of them are working from home. At the same time, you know, the kids are home, whether it's little kids, teenagers, or college students, as we've talked about. And so we're spending more time together under one roof than we would in normal circumstances. And sometimes I think as a mom or dad, you can kind of feel cooped up, and then that begins to cause some maybe some anger or maybe some frustrations. And so maybe things are said, maybe things are done that wouldn't have been in other circumstances. So what advice would you give to husband and wife who are spending much more time at home together than they, well, maybe even than they wanted?
Yes.
I think that you hit it right on the head with the basically the word that I would think is irritability.
Yeah.
You're not all used to being so, every night all together, and much less all day. We're kind of used to having our space. You go do your thing in the day, he goes to do his thing in the day, and the kids do their thing, and so we are cooped up and we're irritable. And so I think, again, the word grace comes in of saying, and just admitting, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I'm a little bit irritable. I'm used to being able to have my time. I'm used to being able to get out, and I'm sorry. So acknowledging it again. And another thing is it's okay to set boundaries and say, right now I'm going to go in here for a little while and take a bath, and I'm gonna go in there by myself for a little while. So y'all do so and so. Give them a thought, and it's okay to take that time of separation. I know you had mentioned when we were talking earlier today that you took some time of separation just to go cut some limbs. I think it's okay for us to just say, I need that time.
Yeah.
And to not take it personally when someone needs that, because we're used to getting that all the time.
Yeah, I agree. I think breaking up the monotony, let's just say you've got a teenager that's been on their computer playing Xbox or whatever, and the idea is, okay, you've been on it for an hour, let's take a break, let's go outside, let's go for a walk, and just being open, and I love the word grace too, because you got to be flexible and realizing that, hey, this is all new, but the more you can focus on the positives, the more you can feel good about what's going on, and actually let that be your momentum builder and say, hey, this is things we couldn't do before. Let's enjoy our time together. Let's spend time, and whether it's do a puzzle, watch a movie, go for a walk. I think just mixing it up helps to change that tension, helps to break that.
Right.
Speaking about things that now we can do that we couldn't do before, there's also some things that we can't do that we could do before. I know my wife and I, our date day is Friday. I'm off on Fridays.
Right.
Kids are, two of them are in college, one of them's in high school, and so they're off at school. And so Friday has always been our day to go out to eat, and it's just kind of time to sit and talk about family, talk about life, make plans for the next week. Well, now we can't go anywhere and sit down and have lunch together.
Exactly.
Right.
And so realizing that those date nights or those date days can be so important for the health of a relationship. What advice would you give to a couple who, like us, where you can't do it the way you've done it before?
You want to go ahead?
No, you go ahead.
I think being creative and realizing that every couple's a little bit different. I know that for my wife and I, before we go to bed and having that time where the kids are in their rooms and we can just share and talk about our day and talk about things that were good and kind of be thankful, and looking for opportunities. Maybe it is in the morning where y'all can have some time together. A lot of times when the kids get through eating, they're gone from the table. Stay at the table and sit and talk and just take advantage of any opportunity you get to connect and talk, because you don't have that date lunch. Ours is Wednesday. And so we've been missing that for the last 3 or 4 weeks.
I think that it would mean a lot just to hear if, let's say, for instance, with you, Pastor, if you said to your wife, I miss our lunch dates. That would do a lot for her heart, just to know that you loved it and that meant something to you. And so if you just said, I miss our lunch dates, I can't wait until we get to have those again.
Yeah.
And that also is hopeful in that this is a temporary thing, and we're going to get back to our other norm most likely, and so we want to, if we can at least say to each other, I miss that, and then ask each other, what could I do that would help you, and I know you miss those. What could I do that would help you during this time that's difficult, where we don't get to have that?
Yeah. I had a question submitted that I want to address. I think it's a great question. We've talked about particularly couples who are parents. But what about the couple who don't have any children at home? It's just the two of them. And now, because of quarantine or shelter in place, now it's just the two of them in the house. And so that can, the irritability you talked about, it can cause a couple to maybe argue over little things. Things that you know probably aren't that important, particularly after you cool down and think about it. But just that irritability and that frustration, it just comes out. So what would you say to that couple with no kids who is arguing over just simple things in the midst of all this?
I think just talk about how hard this is, the adjustment, and realizing because we're not in our normal routine, there is a little tension here. There's a little uncomfortableness or awkwardness that I think we're all struggling with. But I do think if they can put some routine in their days and have some FaceTime with their children or grandchildren, I think that's a time to feel something to look forward to. And maybe take a walk outside, break up sitting in the house all the time, go work in the garden, plant something. You know, I think that's a great idea. We did a family project where we cleaned out the shed, and so that was something I would have never done without this quarantine.
It's funny that that's where your mind went, because that's where mine went too, is I think we do have to be more creative. The things that maybe they did before where they were both gone during the day and then maybe they just watched TV at night, that was enough. For that time period, but now they need to think about a little more outside the box of what else can we do. And maybe there is a project, like he said, you know, the shed. You know, for us, we strip down wallpaper 3 layers in a hallway. Believe me, that'll give you a project and keep you busy for a while. But something together to do that would help them to, you know, just sitting there together. I mean, how many days in a row can you do that without anybody getting bored or, you know, kind of depressed or irritated? So, you know, thinking outside the box, what can we do that is different? You know, maybe they start a devotion book, order it together on Amazon. Maybe they say, we're going to do a house project. We're going to clean the shed. We're going to, you know, paint a wall. Something that they've neglected doing. Maybe they say, we're going to read a book. You know, I've had this stack of books. I mean, so many people have a stack of books that they haven't read. I'm going to read this book that I've said I was going to read forever. Thinking a little bit more outside,
I like that.
outside the box.
I want to ask you to address something. Just as I guess as a pastor, you talk to particularly younger couples, newer couples, couples that hadn't been married that long, maybe don't have any children, or maybe they have young children.
Right.
And you just kind of sense, particularly with younger couples, just a huge desire that everything is perfect all the time.
Right.
And just an expectation that every day at home is supposed to be like Leave It to Beaver, or supposed to be, you know, shows that they wouldn't know anything about, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Where just husband and wife, and everybody's just happy, and kids just jump in and help with the chores, and everybody handles everything perfectly. But it's just not reality.
That's right.
Yes.
And we've talked before about how, you know, difficult times, they do build character, but sometimes it also reveals it, right?
Absolutely.
And sometimes difficult times have a tendency to reveal to us that our expectations have been a little much. So what would you say to the young couple who just wants everything to be perfect and it's not?
Right.
Because it's a real struggle.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
When I do my premarital, one of the areas that we talk about are marriage expectations. And I think that's a great topic, Chip, to bring up, because our expectations, if they're up here and you don't meet them, you're going to be disappointed.
That's right.
And I think bringing those expectations down to something that you and your spouse have talked about, what can we do here? Is this even something we ought to be shooting for?
Right.
And when husbands and wives are not communicating, that's the breakdown where they're not on the same page. So I think just having that conversation, what are our expectations during this quarantine? Am I putting too much on me? And I know moms and wives can do that. They put a lot on themselves, and I think that can be a struggle.
Yes, and I think that our expectations sometimes are very unrealistic, and I think that the reason why that shows itself so much in young marriage is because they hadn't had time to see yet what it really
seasons,
looks
yeah.
like.
Yeah.
So they've still got this, standard here of this is what it's going to be like. And then a lot of times what happens, I think, is that they get fearful and worried, and the thought comes in their mind. It becomes a spiral and a snowball of, oh, what if I've married the wrong person, and what if we're not supposed to be together? And it gets totally anxious and out of control, when in reality it's just the real life. That is just a normal ebb and flow of relationship. That is just kind of the way any relationship is as far as intimacy goes. Our relationship with the Lord at times is really, really close. At other times we say, Lord, I need you. I can't feel you. That reflects in our marriage too. We have that ebb and flow of relationship. And knowing that and just saying that to someone who is young in marriage gives them such a peace and a freedom to think, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be all right. And just believing and knowing that if you keep working at it, that ebb, it will come back. It will come back, the intimacy. And remembering again, like I said earlier, this is a temporary time. Things are going to swing back to where, things look a little more normal and feel a little more normal.
It's kind of funny you're mentioning ebb and flow as our graphic continues to go on and off, right? It's kind of a good picture of relationships, right?
exactly,
Sometimes
right.
things are on, and sometimes
Yes.
things are not so good.
Correct.
I mean, it's
Right,
That's right.
it's just a natural part of life, and being able to accept that. I think
Right.
being
Yes.
able to accept
Good one.
Right.
imperfection is
Yes.
a really important thing.
Yes.
Now let me ask you this question, and we've got another question I want to get to here in a second, and so I'm going to look at it while you're answering this
Okay.
question.
Okay.
But how would you advise couples to help each other? I know we talked about before we got down here that particularly men, we are always behind, right? And so our wives, who are more relational, as you said, have a tendency to pick up on cues or different things from men, but we guys, we don't get it.
Right.
And we admit that we don't get it, and it's one of our frustrations because we just don't get it. And so how would you recommend a couple communicating to each other what's really going on, not just with me, but also maybe what bothers me about what you're doing or what you're saying? How would you handle that?
Yeah. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I think a thing that would be very helpful is to have the question, what can I do for you today that would make you feel loved or that would help you in this quarantine?
Yeah.
And I think, okay, so let's just say the wife gets something from the husband on Wednesday, well, the husband gets something from the wife on Thursday, and just try to meet each other's need and verbalize that. And sometimes that need can't be met, but at least you're being heard and learning to listen. And I think you're right, Jeff. I think a lot of times men are clueless to what our wives need. And it's important that they speak up, that they say, hey, this is what I need tonight from you. Maybe I need you to put the kids down, or maybe I need you to wash the dishes, And just that little bit of stepping into the marriage and saying, I'm gonna do my part can go a long way.
Yeah.
I agree. And, I think that if we, but going back to the expectations thing is really part of this too. Because if as a wife, you are thinking in your mind, I wish he would this, this, and this, but you never say it, then, and like you said, he's lost, he doesn't know, then that causes frustration and continual disappointment, which wears away at the relationship. Most of the time, if your spouse really loves you and you're able to express, this is what I need, they want to try to meet that and match that. But what happens is, I think we get in our mindset of that it's romantic and it's really neat if the person would just know it on their own. And then we sit back and stay disappointed and mad because they don't know it. And like during this quarantine, say for instance, you are usually used to being a teacher and you're used to being gone all day. And then now you're having to stay home with your kids, you're worn out. Well, he comes in, maybe his day is not very different. So he doesn't know you need anything different. And if you don't say it and you're sitting there waiting on him to walk in and say, hey, what do you need? It's not going to happen most likely. And then you get angry, and then he doesn't even know why you're angry. And so it's almost like this spiral. Whereas if you just said, hey, it'd be great today when you came in if you could blank, whatever that is. Like Don said, maybe I'm going to go for a walk and you keep the kids for a little while. If we say it, but part of the expectation problem is sometimes not wanting to state it.
Yeah.
That doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't
You're
work.
right. It doesn't work with guys. They
No,
gotta,
it
you
doesn't
gotta
work.
let us know. Another question that's been submitted has to do with balance, right? I mean, how do you balance all of the responsibilities? You think particularly for the mom who's staying at home, right? So now it's work, so I have to make sure that I'm meeting deadlines and pleasing my employer with my work.
Yeah.
Then it's homeschooling essentially, and so I have to make sure that I'm taking care of my children and all of the things related to that. Then there's being the chef, right? And sometimes being the chief cook and chief dishwasher, as some people would say. Just having to do the normal things around the house, and then at the same time, having to be a good spouse. So now all of these roles are converging into a single day.
Right.
Yeah.
What would you say to the person who's struggling with balance?
I think that we have to think of it as because we're in a different time and some of those duties that are not normally maybe on you every day, you've gotten some added, like you're not usually maybe the homeschool mom, your kids are usually at school and the teacher's helping with all of that. And so you realize that you've taken on more, and so you've got to also delegate more.
Absolutely.
And so you can say, hey, I went to the grocery store today and I cooked, so I need somebody else to clean up. And whereas maybe normally mama always cleaned up and nobody even thought about it. Maybe now if she's also doing the homeschool and she's also doing this and that and this and that, maybe she can just be able to say, I need somebody to clean up. And then also setting the boundaries between, right now we're going to have our time together. Maybe she's going to say to the kids, this time of day, I'm focused on you, we're going to do your work, but tonight I'm going to spend some time with Dad. Trying to balance it and set the boundaries. And a schedule helps too, of kind of knowing I'm going to work on work for these certain hours, then I'm putting work away. I'm going to work with the kids on these few hours, then I'm going to do dinner. Kind of having a schedule and a routine.
I like that. Henry Blackaby's kind of a hero of mine, and he wrote Experiencing God, and we had him at First Baptist Biloxi, and I asked him one time, I said, listen, it's just you and me. I've got a question I've been dying to ask you. You've got all these kids. I think he had like 5 children. So you've got these kids, you travel a lot, you write books, you've pastored. I'm a young husband, young dad, young pastor. I said, how do you balance all of your different roles? I'll never forget, he looked at me and he said, you're looking at it all wrong. Don't balance, blend. He says, you are a husband, and you are a father, and you are a pastor. And don't try to balance them because that will never work. Find ways to blend them. And then he began to talk to me about things like, when he would go preach somewhere, he would take one of his children with him. And so that he was able to be a pastor and he was able to be a
the
father.
both and.
And he was giving his wife a break, taking one away. And so that's always made a ton of sense to me, and it seems kind of like what you're talking about. And here's a question this is a tough question. What do you do when you realize that your spouse maybe is struggling with depression? How do you motivate them without nagging them?
Well, that's a great question.
It is a great question.
Well, I think it starts with a conversation. When I have clients come into my office with depression, you ask them the things, are you sleeping well? Are you exercising? Are you eating? Are you staying on a good, routine about going to bed at the same time and getting up at the same time? Are you engaging friends? We were talking about the other day, a few minutes ago, about what you can do for that couple that doesn't have children. I think reaching out to somebody that you hadn't talked to since we've been quarantined. I got a call last night from a friend that I sit with in Tuesday men's stories, and so the Bible study, and it was great to hear from him. And he asked about a couple other friends and kind of got me thinking about reaching out to some friends that I hadn't talked to. And I think that's a great idea, because you get your focus off yourself. But as far as the wife, she needs to ask, okay, is he been to see his general practitioner? Is he taking medicine? Does he need to come in and see a counselor? And the thing about coming into a counselor, you're coming to talk about the things you don't easily talk about at home. And so that's why counseling can be so effective, is you've set it out an hour to go and talk about what you're struggling with.
Yeah.
I think part of it is in the delivery too. You know, if you say to him, to your husband, if you say, "You seem depressed," then immediately he's going to be on the defensive and say, "No, I'm not. I'm not depressed." But if you use your words and communicate and say, "I've noticed," you know, "I've noticed that you just seem a little off lately. You know, I've noticed that you seem down. You know, I've noticed," and all these things that make her think he could be depressed. She lists those and says them. You know, "I've noticed it and I'm worried." She speaks from her point of view. You know, "I'm worried about you, and I've noticed this, and I've noticed you're not sleeping. I've noticed you don't really care to do the things that you used to do." And when you say all that, and you say, "I've noticed it," and then you say, "Do you think maybe that it would help you to go to a counselor?" And you ask him. You don't say, "You need to go to a counselor," because immediately someone goes, "No, I don't."
That's right.
I mean, we immediately get on the defensive. I mean, I would too. You know, if someone said, "You need," I was,
Yeah.
So if you just talk to them from, "I've noticed and I'm worried about, and do you think it would help you to go to a counselor?"
Right.
And then you can say things like, you know, "So many people do, and it's really okay." You normalize it for him. You know, think of all the people, you know, in our country who are going to a counselor or who, you know, are depressed. It's really okay, and you normalize it and tell him that you support him in it. And then you leave it with him for a little bit to see if maybe he will just on his own say, you know, I think I'll do that. Instead of trying to force feed it down his throat.
Yeah.
That force feeding doesn't work either.
Let me ask you, Don. I mean, you men's ministry is kind of your forte. I mean, that's your heart. And you talked about being in the business sector for many years and then feeling the need to really reach out to men. What would you say to a man who may be watching this with his wife even tonight? And the idea about going to see a counselor is just, in his mind, a sign of weakness. In his mind, something that's just for things that are way out there in another dimension, and it's just all crazy talk kind of stuff. What would you say to that man who might be watching this webcast, who really needs to talk to somebody, but is hesitant in doing so? What would you say to that guy?
Well, I would ask him the first question, is life working for him? Is he getting his needs met? Is he being fulfilled? Does he feel like that God is, you know, that he's finding peace and joy in life? And if life's not working for him, go to somebody that's trained, that's a professional, that can help him see what's not working and do some changes. Because a lot of times people don't realize that talking to a professional can change your whole outlook and what you can be doing and what is available out there. I know I was reading an article about Michael Phelps, the gold medalist that swimmer, was coming out and saying, "Hey, I have depression and I go see a therapist, and mental health is important, and don't be afraid to go out there and see it." So she could share articles with this man and say, "Hey, here are some people that have come out and talked the benefits of counseling," and just show him the research shows that it helps you to go.
Absolutely. And a lot of times the expectation, again, we're talking about expectation a lot today, of what you think it's going to be like is not what it's like at all.
That's right.
You know, you think of, something that a lot of times kids will come in, like teenagers that I see, and I'll say, "Have you ever been to counseling before?" And they'll say no, and they kind of got the big eyes, and I'll say, "It's going to be just like you're talking to somebody else's mom."
Right.
And I said, "Because you are."
Yeah.
And they'll go, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay." And it's almost, it immediately puts them at ease. And so when you think of a man in that sense, and you say, you know, how is it okay for him to go? If he came to see Don, it would be kind of like sitting across from just another man, a trusted friend who has some experience,
Yeah.
who has some, you know, he has his degree, yes, but he has some experience with people, things that have worked with people.
Right.
And it's basically just saying, yeah, I'll go and sit down and listen to what he has to say. And instead, and making it something of what it really is, you know, instead of this, oh my gosh, I just can't do that, I just can't do that. you
Right.
know.
Makes a lot of sense. We're running out of time. This has been great discussion, but I do want to get to one other thing, and we'll have to be brief with it.
Okay.
But you talked about how you've seen some good in marriages through this COVID-19. So I'd like for you, just as we kind of wrap up today, talk about some of the good that you've seen.
I was meeting with a couple yesterday, and he's actually a football coach, and he says, it's been so good being at home and being with my girls and being able to just connect and not being just crazy busy and running, you know, getting in and eating supper at 8 o'clock and trying to get homework done and get the girls in bed. I mean, the joy is there's a lot of positives that we can take away from this, and I just want to encourage the audience out there to think about what's good that you can focus on.
That's right. That's right. I agree with that. You know, changing our perspective and thinking, you know, my daughter is, she's about to be married, and then the other one's about to graduate from high school. So thinking about these are precious days that all 5 of us are at home together.
Yes.
Yeah.
And instead of saying, oh, we're not able to do this, we can't do this, thinking of it as, wow, look what we're getting to do in certain ways.
Great point. Well, listen, thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. We want to thank you for joining in with us on the webinar today, and we hope that you'll join us again next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Also, again, want to encourage you to share this webinar with your friends and family members and neighbors. I really think that this is some helpful stuff, and it'd be great if you would help us to help others by letting them know about what's going on. And then I of course, want to remind you about Summit Counseling. What a great ministry God has blessed us with here at First Baptist Jackson, and they are here and ready to help you, to be that listening ear, to be that other mom or that other friend who can just talk with you through some of these difficult things that we're experiencing. Listen, there is help available to you. Sometimes you just have to reach out and ask for it. And so the number to Summit Counseling Ministry is 601-949-1949, or you can contact the office at jwoods, W-O-O-D-S, at fbcj.org. We hope that you'll pick up that call or send that email and begin on the road to healing and help navigating through this new normal. Thank you again for joining us today. Hope you'll tune in again next week.